All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for showing up today to this Hunchly training session. My name is Justin Seitz. I'm the one who leads up the team at Dark River Systems that builds Hunchly and a bunch of other stuff that we do. Today we're just going to be doing a straightforward training kind of front to back of Hunchly, how to use it. Of course, I'm here to answer any questions you might have, both about Hunchly, OSINT, whatever it is that I can try to help to answer while we're here. Session should take about an hour, depending on the number of questions. They can stretch a little longer at times. It will be recorded, so don't worry if you have to drop. If you run into technical issues, I'm not able to help with those once we get started. You should be able to hear me clearly and see my screen. And naturally, ask as many questions as you like in the question and answers box. So that is really helpful. And of course, every one of these sessions is a little different because of those questions. So don't be shy. I will kind of pause throughout, but you can throw them in at any time and I'll address them as we go along. And that should be it for housekeeping. And naturally, as well, I always ask if you have any suggestions for webinars that you would like to see me do in the future. You can also send those to me as well. So let's jump in. All right, so you should be able to see my screen. And I'm looking at Hunchly 231 right now. That's our latest release. You definitely should go download that if you haven't already. And Hunchly is kind of broken up into two different components. One component is the dashboard, what we're looking at right now. This is where we manage our cases. And as you'll see as we move along, there's a bunch of investigative tools, reporting, exports, all kinds of stuff like that. And the other component lives in our browser. And its job in life is to follow you around as you're doing your investigative work and preserve every web page that you see. So when I say web browser, I mean anything that's Chromium based. So that's Google Chrome, Chromium, Brave, as well as Microsoft Edge. So the new Edge is fully Chromium made, which is great. We do not support Firefox. Rather, Firefox just doesn't have kind of the internal machinery that allows us to do evidence capture. And we don't support Safari or, God forbid, Internet Explorer. So when we need to get started with Hunchly, often the first thing that happens is people open up the dashboard, they kind of look at it and go, okay, now what? And the first thing and the most important thing really is that whether you're working in law enforcement or you're doing private investigative work or kind of an OSINT contract, you want to keep all of your cases separate, right? And this is much like any of your case management tools or anything else. So the first step we're going to do is we're just going to create a new case. And that's really all we need to do to get started. So I'm going to add a new case by clicking that plus sign, and I'm going to go new case. And we always investigate me on these webinars, maximum embarrassment. Perfect. So I got a Justin Seitz case. Note that you will always have an unassigned case. It is there by default. It is there to just make sure you got a case ready for you if you want to jump into an investigation. And that's it. That's all I need to do. So I'm going to open up my browser, and I'm going to point out a few things to you. Now, the first thing is we can see the Hunchly extension up here in the top right. If you don't see it there and you just see this puzzle piece, which is actually puzzling because I don't know why Chrome really did this, but we can click this puzzle piece and you can click the pin to just simply keep Hunchly 2 in your extensions. So this is just going to keep it so that it's readily available to you. Again, totally up to you. This is how I keep mine. And if we click on the Hunchly extension, there's a few more button clicks that we need to look at before we can start investigating. The first is this capture switch. So when Hunchly is disabled, you're going to see it's kind of gray and angry looking like me. It's crossed out. That's telling you that the automatic capture is not running. And when we enable it, it is. Very simple. So that's one button click. And the other is we just want to make sure we're capturing in the right case. Okay, that's it. So really to get started takes about, I don't know, maybe a minute or less. Create a new case, open up your browser, turn on Hunchly, pick the right case, and now I can actually show you how to do capture with it. And that's it, actually. That training is over. So real training for Hunchly actually only takes about 4 minutes, because that's really it. That's all you needed to do. By browsing to google.com, Hunchly has now captured this page, timestamped it, hashed it, and stored a permanent copy on your hard drive. So this means that for all of time in the future, I can always come back and see exactly what Google looked like in this moment. Now, of course, it's not super useful without doing a search, so we'll search for me. The nice thing is that as Hunchly is capturing, which it's just done here, it's actually capturing all of the text, all of the images, the links, everything off of this page. So it's not just doing a screenshot, like a picture of the page. It's actually capturing everything that you see here, including the images, the text, and all the styling, all of that great stuff. And that's it. Just the act of browsing as we're moving along, Hunchly is picking up every page as we go, doing that time stamping and hashing along the way. So let's pop over the dashboard and see what it looks like. Cool. So now we can see we have, sorry, I'll show you this. 2 pages viewed. We did 1 search. And here's our history view. So this history view is a nice, rich, chronologically ordered view of every page that you've captured in this case. It's really nice to be able to see this. And of course, later on, you'll see how we can kind of organize it or kind of filter down into it. So let's click on this page we captured. This is our page review screen. So this is where you're able to go back and look at any page you've captured in the past. And as I mentioned before, this is a permanent copy being loaded off of your hard drive. It is not reaching out to the internet to like load images or anything like this. This capture is going to look exactly the same when I open it up 6 months from now or 6 years from now. It's all going to look the same. So the great thing here as well is just the ability for us as investigators, particularly if you ever have to go to court or you have a legal proceeding, all of the important questions that we need as investigators, particularly as it relates to evidence, they're all here for us, right? So what did we see, which is the actual page capture itself? Where did we see it? The URL. When did we see it? Which is the date. Now you'll notice that there's also an updated timestamp right here. And in this case with Google, it's actually the same. So we see they both match. The reason for this and what the updated timestamp is telling you is, for example, if you're on a page like that, I don't know, Facebook or Twitter, you're scrolling down and the page is loading more content into the bottom, and we're going to address Twitter and Instagram here shortly. What's going to happen is Hunchly will continue to update that capture for 30 minutes before it actually starts a new capture, right? So what'll happen is you'll see this updated timestamp get updated as that capture is being updated. In the case of Google, because the entire page all loads at once, there is no updates to do. There's no dynamic content. I can scroll up and down Google all day long and nothing's going to happen. There's nothing kind of dynamically being inserted or removed. All right. And the hash, naturally, this is so that you can export this page and disclose it in a court proceeding, sending along the hash itself. Now, what this is going to allow the other party, the third party on the other side of your disclosure, to do is also hash the page and come up with the same result. This is just telling both of you that the act of you disclosing that page didn't alter the content in some way. It is not, however, telling anybody that you didn't mess with something or alter something in any way. Of course, in any system, there's ways to trick things, but this does raise the bar. There are additionally, and this is important, if you have other questions about how Hunchly manages files, how we do hashing, this evidence guide will be important for you to review. I'll just pop this into the chat window here quick while I have it, so you all have it. There you go. So this is going to walk you through how we kind of capture things, the hashing, and we do actually do some additional work behind the scenes to try to prevent or at least make it difficult for people to tamper with data before they submit it as evidence. But again, the important parts are all there for you in the dashboard right here, and you can export this information both to PDF and to MHTML, which we'll cover a little later. All right. So that is it. That is capture. This is how you just go out and do your work, do your capturing, and Hunchly kind of follows along and picks up the pieces behind you. So you have that nice breadcrumb trail and permanent copies of all your work. Now, where you can run into some interesting situations is in particular Instagram. So let's take a look at Amber Mac's profile here. All right, cool. Now, so we're looking at an Instagram profile, and there's some interesting stuff that's going to happen here. So as I scroll down, let's just keep note of this picture, this video in the top left. All right, and let's scroll down. So as we scroll down, right, down and down, we keep going, you're going to note that Hunchly kind of glows orange. If you keep one eyeball on Hunchly, that's just telling you it's synchronizing, it's doing its thing, preserving the page, right? And more images keep getting loaded, the page keeps getting longer. Very cool, right? Looks pretty straightforward. Now let's take a look at the dashboard. All right. So here's the page, right? Everything looks cool so far. Where did all the images go, right? You can see as I scroll down, it's just nothing but a big gray area, and then all of a sudden, the images are back. So why is that? Well, what's happening on Instagram is a sleight of hand trick, like a magician does. So as you're scrolling down, what Instagram is doing is these images are loaded in, but the images at the top of the screen are actually unloaded. Okay, so they're pulled out. You don't see it, but what they're doing is they're giving you the illusion of one long continuous page. But what they're doing behind the scenes is actually, now as I scroll up, they're unloading images underneath this and loading images at the top. So what's happening is there's only ever about 12 to I think they'll do like 12 to 16 images at a time that will be at any given time loaded on the page, and then they're swapping out and swapping in new images depending on which way you scroll. And anything that's kind of above is just loaded with gray pixels. And what this does is give you this illusion as you see the scroll bar shrinking, it gives you this illusion that you're scrolling down one long big page. And that's how Instagram and Facebook and Twitter used to be, right? It used to be just one big gigantic page. You just keep scrolling down, and eventually your like fans would turn on your laptop and your browser would slow down. So this is their way of kind of increasing performance and not having like 1,000 images loaded on the page. So technically, when we're looking at a capture like this, it is accurate because what is on the page at this time is actually only this small number of images. It's not hundreds of them. It's just this small number of images. So Hunchly is technically accurate here. However, as an investigator, we want to capture all those other images. We want to make sure we have everything when we're looking at these pages. So what we need to be able to do, and we're going to make a settings change. So what I recommend you do is shut your browser down while you do this, and we're going to go to settings. The top setting here is page capture sensitivity. And this is where Hunchly is making an intelligent decision about when to do a capture and when not to. By default, it's major changes only. So as major changes occur, Hunchly will do an update to that page capture. This is why we see that situation with Instagram where it's seeing major changes, so it does an update, and that kind of wipes out the images that were unloaded. What we can do is actually set it to all changes. So what this is going to do is instead of it capturing a new capture on major, like anything major, it's actually going to generate a ton of independent individual captures in our history. So by default, remember, it will capture the same page for up to 30 minutes, and then it'll start a new page capture. So that's why you saw there's only one capture here for Amber Mac. And now when I head back there, you're going to see different behavior. All right, so let's head back to Amber's profile. Okay, cool. So I'm going to start scrolling down again, doing my thing. Okay, Hunchly is glowing, doing its thing. There we go. Cool. Very nice. Now let's pop back to the dashboard. Now you can see I have a bunch of captures, tons, in fact. Okay, so what this is doing is that every time Hunchly is getting triggered to do a capture, is it's capturing what's on the page and then starting a new one. So now we actually have those top images, right? And the next capture, if we go back, and you can use those next and previous buttons if you want. So that was here. And then again, what you're going to get is another partial capture with more images, right, underneath it. So you're going to generate a lot more captures, but the great thing is that you're not going to miss any. So here's where after these pictures have been loaded, as I was scrolling by, and these ones got loaded in, Hunchly captures them. So because Instagram is not actually one big, gigantic, one single long page anymore, this is still accurate. You're not missing any images. It's still a complete picture, so you can go back through and look at things. You're not losing anything as well. And we're not doing any tricks that would mess up anything from an evidence perspective. So for example, if we created a single page capture that stitched all of these together, that's actually not accurate. And it does mean that we would have modified the representation of the website at the time that it was captured. So this is a workaround where you're able to kind of turn that capture on to a more aggressive mode. If you're working in social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, use that mode, and then it will generate a lot more captures naturally. Depending on your use case and depending on how you do investigations, some folks just leave this on all the time. They just set it to all changes and leave it on. I personally have kind of some muscle memory around this, so I will just kind of turn it on and off as I need it. It really depends on how you want to use it. All right. And I'm actually going to switch mine back. Any questions about anything I've covered so far, both in terms of just capturing pages, dealing with Instagram, anything like that that I can help to answer or bring clarity to? Definitely now's the time to ask. I'm going to have a quick sip of coffee, and then we will carry on to some investigative tools. All right, we have a question. If you leave the setting to all changes all the time, will this affect anything else? No, it won't. You're going to generate a lot more captures. That's it. Any other page like Google or other places that load the entire page all at once, it's not going to affect those types of pages. Anything that's dynamic, you're just going to end up generating more captures than you would using the default settings. So hopefully that helps to answer that. Cool. I don't see any other questions, so I will carry on. All right, perfect. Cool. So now let's talk about some of the things that Hunchly can do to make your life easier as an investigator. And the first one, and arguably my favorite, is the selector system. So selectors are simply keywords that allow you to kind of track any important pieces of information relating to the subject of your investigation. So, for example, you could put a name in here. So Justin Seitz. You could put in a social media username like that. You can put in a partial phone number. So with phone numbers, I recommend using the last 4 digits of the phone number because phone numbers can be represented in a ton of different ways. And selectors are exact matches. So using the last 4 digits of a phone number might give you a few false positives, but it will match whenever that phone number is presented on a web page. So what's happened here is the first thing Hunchly will do when you add a new selector is it's going to search backwards through your case, looking backwards in time to see, did you encounter this term somewhere else in the past? So for example, if I click on Justin Seitz, it's showing me this Google search page contained Justin Seitz and jms.py as selector hits. This is really useful. The reason is you might be investigating, you might have 1,000 pages captured. You find a new email address, you find a new location, whatever it is, you punch it in as a selector and it comes back and says, hey, you got 10 hits. Well, that's actually telling you you had already encountered that piece of information in the past. You just didn't know it was important at the time. So now you have the ability to kind of go and jump in and take a look. Where else did I see this selector? And it might actually enlighten kind of, oh, this makes sense, or being able to draw connections to previous pages that you've captured. Very useful. Now, the other thing that's going to happen is as I browse around from this point forward, Hunchly is going to be examining the underlying source code of every single page we browse to, looking for these 3 selectors. And it will automatically mark pages for me in my history view, telling me when I encountered one of these 3 selectors. So it's kind of like always having a little robot behind the scenes hitting Control F on your keyboard, looking for those terms for you. Really, really useful. Before I demo this in the browser, I also want to show you a little setting that I use, which is highlight selectors. So this will actually highlight them in yellow on the page for you. You have a couple of options here, and you don't have to use it. I like it. You can turn it on, which means it'll highlight the selectors, and then the highlighting will actually be captured permanently in your evidence. So those of you in law enforcement, you probably don't want this setting, but you can use this one, which is do the highlighting in my browser, but remove it when we do our capture. So we don't see it in the dashboard and we're not sending over highlighted materials through disclosure. So I'm going to turn it on. All right, and we're going to go back and just fire up our browser again. any settings changes because of the way Google Chrome kind of talks to the Hunchly backend. I always recommend just just restart your browser. All your tabs come back because you have Hunchly running. It's not like you're going to lose anything either. So let's just return to our search here. Okay, so now it's pretty obvious where those selector hits are, jms.py and my name. Really useful, kind of calls my attention visually to those spots. And let's see if LinkedIn will actually let us in today. Oh, it will. Look at that. Perfect. Cool. So I've moved on to LinkedIn and we can see the selector highlighting is happening. Okay, very cool. You can see LinkedIn also uses lazy image loading. So it's a weird thing where images are loaded, but they're not displayed until you scroll them into view. So this can be an interesting thing from a capture perspective. Okay. And if you ever have a site that kind of like does weird loading or does some weird kind of image substitution, and you want to always make sure you get a good clean capture, you can always just right click on a page and force a capture this way. So that was just right click, Hunchly to capture. All right, cool. So we've got selector hits on the page. If you don't want to use highlighting, you can always keep one eyeball up on your extension. You'll see this little red badge show up. That's telling you have selector hits on this page, and I can click on the selectors tab here to see which ones were hit. All right, so if you don't have highlighting turned on. Very nice. And now back here in the dashboard, again, I can click on Justin Seitz. I can see that there's a couple of captures. There was my manual one. There's these captures here, my Google search. Very nice. Okay, so it's doing this automatically for us. Now you can also, for example, if you're investigating a group of people, so let's put in Esme Sites, it's my cat. Let's say it's like a group or a gang of some kind. What you can do is by loading up all the folks in that group as selectors, you can actually start doing things like show me any pages where both names were present. So this might be a corporate registration and they're both directors. It might be they're both jabbering online at each other on social media. But this is a nice way. Selectors are actually a great way to start slicing and dicing some of the data you've collected, because you can kind of interrogate it and see like, are these two terms showing up in the same places together? And that again is really useful. So this is really nice. It's just happening in the background. I don't have to think about it. I can be tired or lazy or a whole bunch of other things. As an investigator, Hunchly is going to be tracking those important pieces for us as we move along. And you can also export the entire list and all the matches to a CSV file if you want, which is also really handy. All right. Any questions about selectors before I move on? I will just give a 10-second pause here. It's also actually worth pointing out as you're working, so maybe you're doing some investigative work, you don't have to use the dashboard. So for example, if you wanted to grab a new selector off a page while you're investigating, you can highlight it, right click, Hunchly to, store text as selector. Boom. Now Black Hat Python is a selector automatically stored in the background, and you can just keep on investigating. You don't have to jump back and forth between the browser and the dashboard. All right, I don't see any questions. So let's move on. Talk about tags. So tags are a way for you to keep your investigations organized. So much like tagging in pretty much every other product known on Earth, is really just a way for you to kind of apply categories to your page captures. So you can just add tags from here. So like social media, for example, depending on your investigation, you might have like imagery of weapons, whatever it might be. Very cool. You can also, as a team, if you want to standardize the tags you all use, in your settings, there is a list of default tags. So in default tags, what you can do here is you can add them in, for example. Okay. Now, every new case I create in this dashboard, every new case is going to have these two tags created and ready for me. All right. So if you wanted to standardize across a team, this is a good way of doing it. All right. So let's head back. Cool. So how can we actually use tags? Where can we apply them? Well, from the browser, while we're doing our work, if we, for example, see, we're taking a look at this profile, or maybe we can switch to, we'll pick something else here. Let's go see what kind of mindless stuff I've put on Twitter recently. All right, cool. So this is a social media page. We want to apply that tag. So up here in the Chrome extension, tags, social media. There we go. So now we've applied the social media tag to this page, and that's going to keep it organized for us. So when we're back in the dashboard, or when we're doing exports later on, is really nice because I can actually just say export all of the social media, all the pages tagged with social media, for example. Okay, I can also filter. So I can click on the tag. It's going to filter my history and show me just the pages tagged with social media. I can also mix and match with selectors. So you can say, show me all the social media pages that included Justin Seitz or multiple selectors. So the filtering is works like that. You can kind of add and remove tags and selectors to kind of drill down into your data. And the other thing too is that if you are, for example, on an old capture like this one, and you didn't apply a tag, you can always do it from in here. So you just expand this info panel, and we can say social media. All right, so that's going to add that tag to this page. You can also remove it if you want to. All right, there's also the notion of marking pages as important. So if you find something really important or something that's interesting to you, okay, in the Chrome extension, you can click this star right here. That will mark this page as important. You can also do it from in here on an already captured page by clicking here. Okay. All right. And this will show this nice gold star for you. You can filter on them, okay, by clicking this. That's going to show you just the important pages. All right, so I do this when I work in teams. I encourage people to use this marker because when I import someone's case, I can just hit this one button and see what they thought was actually important, or the captures that are really critical. All right, and much the same way we can export pages later on based on those. So we can say just export the important pages, or just export pages I've tagged with social media, for example. All right, so tags, again, particularly if you have to do disclosure for court cases, use tags. It is a much nicer way of managing stuff that you need to export. Instead of having to walk through like 1,000-page captures, you can just kind of export based on tag and disclose just the stuff that you need to. All right, questions. I see questions. Why is Hunchly extension not working in Brave private window with Tor? That's a good question. I'm not sure if private windows in Brave support extensions. At one point they didn't, but definitely feel free to send a request into our support team. It's just support@hunch.ly, and support@hunch.ly. But Hunchly does work on, you can use Hunchly in the dark web as well, as I'm sure some of you have seen my previous webinars. All right. Is there a way to prevent captures of Google search pages? I tend to include selectors in my searches, then I have to go through the search results. Yes, this is a great question. So let's say we never want to capture anything on google.com. So we can go into our settings, block list management right here. So I can say google.ca, or I can say google.com. Okay. So this is going to prevent any captures occurring on those pages. You can also use specific URLs. So if, for example, we want to capture everything on the Hunchly domain except for index.html, I can do that and use this exact match tick right there. So again, this is also useful for teams of investigators. We have customers that do this where they'll set up quite an extensive block list. So maybe they have like an intranet that they never want ever captured by their analysts, or they want to prevent themselves from logging into like their bank, right? So like maybe bankofamerica.com, never ever log anything when someone does that. And this does happen, right? People make mistakes, they log into something they shouldn't. That's what this block list is for. And you can also add things to the block list from within the browser. So if you're like, oh, I never want to capture anything from here, you can right click and add the domain or add the URL to the block list, and it will do it straight from the browser. So this will help if you've got a lot of Google search results and you don't want them, or other search engines, you can just add them into the block list. Hopefully that helps. Cool. I don't see any other questions, I don't think. All right, cool. We'll move on. So that's selectors and tags. Another one of my favorites, notes. So notes are exactly as they sound. They're a way for you to add context to your investigation. They're also a way to kind of keep an investigative log of what you're looking at, what's important. So how they actually work is when we're on a page like this and we say, hey, this is interesting, or I want to make sure I call this out in my report, I can right click, Hunchly 2, take note. All right, Justin's profile on Bellingcat, and hit save. So what Hunchly is going to do is take a screenshot of what we're looking at right now, what's in the browser. It's going to do a full page capture like always, and it's going to store my note in the background. So now we have this kind of running history of anything that we found interesting. We have the note, we know where it came from. We can click on the page and go look at the entire capture. And I use notes a ton, like tons. I create a pile of them. So as I'm moving around doing my thing, let's just find, I don't know, I'm trying to find something that I'm like not worried about loading. Well, here, let's go to Amazon. All right, cool. So there's some of my books. No, I don't want to buy those. All right, so here's some books. I can go Hunchly 2. Okay, so this again, right click, Hunchly 2, take note, note box pops open, Justin's books, hit save. Okay, that's it. You can also bind this to a keyboard shortcut. If you don't want to do the clicking, you can do that by binding keyboard shortcuts in the Google Chrome settings. So that's it. And again, this is giving us this nice chronologically ordered kind of set of notes. I find this particularly useful if, for example, I like take off for a volleyball tournament for a weekend, stop working on Friday, my body gets all bruised and battered. I come back Monday and I'm like, what the hell was I even looking at or working on? I can jump into my notes and very quickly just read through them and see, here's all the stuff I was looking at or what I found that was important. I'll often also sometimes like leave little to-do items in my notes, and we do have a little to-do list management here, like remember to check Twitter again, whatever it might be. I can do that. You can also template these to-do items as well. So you can have like a set list of to-do items on every case that gets open. They're already sitting there and waiting for you. So these notes are incredibly useful. You can use them later in reporting. You can export them as well. I use these a lot, and I recommend investigators use them a lot because it really can make a huge difference in just overall how your cases flow, and keeping yourself in your own investigative loop, really. If you ever are doing case review and you're kind of like poking around back through old captures or something, and you see something where you're like, oh, hey, this is actually something I should have taken a note of, no problem. You can always retroactively add a note from here. So interesting dark web articles, hit add. Same thing, Hunchly will take a screenshot of viewable area here, add the note back in. Okay, so we can see it here. Okay, very nice. Use notes. Trust me, they're a lifesaver. They make a huge difference, and they're really like, it only takes a second to take them, and they really will help you when you're doing case review or doing reporting later. There's very few people I think that are Hunchly users that don't use them, or at least once I show them how useful they are, then they start. So definitely something that I recommend. Make your cases flow a little smoother. Awesome. Any questions about notes? What to do with them? How to take them? I'll give you a little 10-second pause again. Doesn't look like it. All right. Oh, we have a question. Does the page capture sensitivity work in Facebook as well? Yes, it does. So Facebook as well can do some, and they actually like they'll change how they do things relatively frequently, once a year, even sometimes quicker than that. Um, so Facebook, same thing. Use that page capture sensitivity thing. Sometimes Facebook also does some weird stuff with loading images. So we've made the Chromium team at Google aware of some of these kind of weird things where the engine inside of Chromium that we leverage to do capture can kind of get a little confused about how they're loading images. So if you ever run into issues, I always recommend like try capture on the regular Facebook, try capture on the mobile version. If for some reason there's some weird thing going on, it's just m.facebook.com, or there's like a very low bandwidth version of Facebook called mbasic.facebook.com. So this looks like, when you were browsing on a cell phone in the early 2000s, it will actually work great on mbasic.facebook.com. They do this for low bandwidth countries. So again, those are three options: M or mbasic. .facebook.com if you have to capture a particular post or something and Facebook's doing something weird. All right, cool. Let's head back. We'll talk about images. So Hunchly does a few things with images while you're browsing. The first is every image is actually extracted from the page, hashed and stored separately. So you actually get this folder in your Hunchly data. So if you go into Documents, Hunchly Data, there will be this Photos folder that's actually every photo from every page of every case. So this is actually designed for our law enforcement partners that need to take images and run them through image recognition routines, looking for CSAM, so child sexual abuse material, for example. So this is an entire folder that you can literally drop into an analysis tool and have it run through all of them. Or if you want to build a gallery or you build tools on top of Hunchly, this folder gives you all of those, which is really cool. As part of that process, it is also scanning those images for EXIF metadata. And if we find EXIF metadata, so here's some interesting ones, just some random profile images and some other things. What Hunchly will do is bring them forward to you so that you can actually look at the EXIF metadata contained within them. So here's a picture of my ugly mug taken in 2015. You can see some other details here. So for example, I took this with a BlackBerry, the last human on Earth with a BlackBerry in 2015, probably. Now, again, this can be really useful, particularly in dark web investigations. If you're like going through drug markets or other places, or if someone stood up a new site and they didn't realize that they had some EXIF metadata in some of the images, that can provide investigative clues. There's also, for example, there's a really nice GPS extraction that'll occur if there's GPS coordinates stored in an image. Hunchly will actually pull them out and build you a map, a link to Google Maps, so you can see where the image was taken. All right. Now, another interesting thing that we can kind of do here is if we head to arstechnica.com, just as a test for all of you, ours actually has a ton of metadata in their images. So if you ever want to do like a known test of like just looking at what the EXIF metadata looks like or some examples, head to arstechnica.com. One of the images they had on a news story actually during one of these webinars, we were able to geolocate William Shatner out in the hills of Arizona somewhere because they left their GPS coordinates on. So by going here, here's a ton of images that have been pulled off of ours, and we'll just give you some good samples to look at, right? Image descriptions and all kinds of like who the artist was. Again, you might find things like GPS coordinates. Sometimes that's really cool. We're not seeing any here. There are some example images out there with GPS coordinates. There's someone taking a COVID test, it looks like. All right, so this is really nice, this EXIF metadata extraction. Again, it happens all on its own in the background. It is lightweight EXIF metadata as well, so there are tools that will do very thorough kind of and every known format of images. EXIF tool, for example, if you wanted to use that to do a second pass, you can definitely do that. Now, the other cool thing we can do with images, all right, well, we'll just head into this Elon Musk article, I guess. Cringe. All right, so we have an image that's of interest. So it might be the subject of our investigation. If you're doing asset tracing, it might be like a yacht or something. And what we can do is we can right click on that image. And in the Hunchly 2 menu, we can say add caption to image. And we can say lawsuit, bad news, and hit save. So what this will do is pull this image out and it will add that caption to it. So as we're investigating, we can be kind of tagging those images with those captions and saying like, okay, here's this interesting thing, or here's this person, or here's an asset, whatever it might be. And we have this nice investigative gallery of images that we've assigned those captions to, and it'll make your life easier. You can also use it in reporting later on as well, as I will show you. So again, this is something that I do. It's not often that I guess in a general sense that I'm like captioning everything I see. I'm usually using notes in a lot of cases, but definitely for if you're targeting individuals or you're trying to find assets or whatever it might be, like I will build up quite a gallery of images that I've captioned. And naturally, you're able to go and view the page that it came from. And there's also the ability, if there's EXIF metadata in it, to do that. Okay, you can click the badge here and see what the EXIF metadata was in that caption image. Okay, you can also caption images from here. So if, for example, you wanted to caption this image because it has EXIF data in it, you can do that, like that. Okay, so you're just hitting the plus button. And again, as a refresher, in the browser, right click on an image, Hunchly to add caption to image. Okay, Hunchly to add caption to image. That's it. Any questions about images, EXIF metadata, anything like that I can help to answer? I'll give it a second. And yep, someone asked me to do the capture again. That second image captioning was for you, definitely. So again, anything in the browser when you're using Hunchly, if you're like, how do I do this again? Right click, head to Hunchly 2, and then all the options will be in there, whether it's take a note, caption an image, or trigger a full page capture, for example. It's all in that right click menu. All right. Doesn't look like there's any questions about that. Cool. Let's talk about attachments. So there are a couple of different ways that we can get non-web pages, documents, other stuff into Hunchly. Now, the first way is we can actually add them manually from our hard drive, or if you have a source or CI or whoever sending you a file and you want to add it into your Hunchly case so you have it, we can click this add button. All right, so I'm going to grab an image. Cool. So Hunchly copies the file in, it also hashes it, tells you that it was added manually. If you've ever used Hunchly Mobile, which is kind of like this little vault for screenshots or other files from a mobile device, when you bring Hunchly Mobile cases into Hunchly Desktop, you will see the same thing. It will bring them all into this attachments panel and give you hashes. Now, a little security note here. By clicking the link, this is going to give you this warning. Are you sure you want to open this file? Now, again, be mindful that if this is a Word document from an untrusted source, or it's God forbid, a piece of malware, whatever, once you click OK, that's it. So clicking OK here, this is just me bottle feeding a baby raccoon. All right, so that's okay, but it is going to open that file. So just as a little cautionary note, I also recommend don't leave your attachments unlabeled because it will make it a nightmare for you later. It's important that you add a description. So Justin bottle feeding smudge. That was her name. All right, cool. Now, the other way that we can get attachments into Hunchly is we can tell Hunchly, just download automatically anytime we download things, automatically add them to our case. Okay, so how we do that is in our settings panel. So we go settings, down here, we have attached downloads. Now it's off by default, again, for security reasons. In my install that I use, it's always on. So I always leave it on because I want all of my downloads automatically attached to my case. So if I've used a YouTube downloading tool, if I've used, pulled down some corporate registration documents, whatever, I want those to show up in my case. Govern yourselves accordingly and based around your own security policies. That's just how I do it. So how this works. So let's head back and let's go file type, docx, and let's go Python. Maybe not Python hacking. Actually, let's see if we can find a pirated copy of one of my books. So let's go Gray Hat Python. And there you go. So I'm guessing, someone's pirating my book here. Yeah, very nice. Pirated copy, freebie for all. Okay, so what's going to happen here on a PDF is Hunchly's going to make a copy of the entire thing and save it on our attachments. And this will work the same way. So we can see there's our Qt, and there's our Gray Hat Python programming book, tells us where we downloaded it from, have a hash of the file. We can say like pirated copy of GHP. Very cool. Okay, so same thing. Word documents, video files, audio files, whatever it is, Hunchly will automatically pull those down into our case, hash them, which means we can then disclose them for court purposes because we have a hash of the file, and it's going to tell you where you downloaded it from, which is important. So that can be PDFs, Word docs, real downloads. So PDFs get rendered in your browser. So let's go file type, docx, and we'll just pick raccoons because I don't want to download a Word document of something real dangerous. I'll just pick a random one here. Okay, great. Let's try another one here. Mayfield City Schools has raccoon tracks and sign. Is their website also slow? All right. Tips to discourage raccoons. Apparently downloading Word documents on raccoons is difficult today. Cool. Same thing. Word document got downloaded and didn't get rendered in the browser. So we can tell where we got it from. Hash, same thing. Annotate it. Always annotate these so that you're not like scratching your head later trying to figure out what attachment was what. All right. Any questions about attachments? Doesn't look like it. All right. Well, we'll keep moving. Let's talk about searches. So searches are just a nice panel telling you what keywords you punched into what search engine. Really useful if you ever get stuck on a case where you're like, I don't even know what to look for anymore. This happens to many of us. I'll jump into my searches panel. I usually notice one of two things. One, I'm only using Google, right? So not good investigative technique to only use one search engine. For example, if we go to Yandex and we run the exact same search, we're going to get totally different results, right? It's actually a pirated copy of one of my books first, then Twitter, Bellingcat, and some other stuff. So totally different results, meaning completely different investigative angles. And really, this is telling us like, number one, remember to search for your selectors, right? So even like I'll get busy or discover a bunch of stuff and realize I haven't even Googled for jms.py. It'll also help you kind of get an idea of where you're doing your searches from, give you ideas to expand those somewhere else, right? So we're monitoring all of the major search engines and social media platforms, just looking for what keywords you're running for searches. Very simple. All right, cool. I don't see any questions popping up, so I want to try to keep this on time. We'll just keep trucking along. Data. So what this tab is telling us is that we were able to extract little pieces of information from pages that you were browsing on. So this might be anything from tracking codes like Google Analytics IDs, tracking pixels from Facebook, Tor hidden services. So if we find any references to Tor hidden services, we'll pull them out. We can also extract email accounts. So here this John Brodkin was actually pulled out of the Ars article. Okay. So again, this is trying to give you leads and trying to give you ideas for where you can go and look or run those analytics IDs in other tools, try to bring things forward to you that might give you investigative ideas or help you chase things down. And you might not have saw that click there, but I can click this apply as filter button right there, and that's going to show me any pages that contained that particular email address. All right. We can also export these later if we want, like get a CSV of all of the data that was extracted. There's only a handful of data extractors. So if you're using Hunchly and you're like, oh, it'd be nice if Hunchly would extract, X, Y, Z, just send us an email and we'll see. We'll take a look at implementing the pattern for you. All right, cool. We are nearing the end. We're going to talk about how to get information out of Hunchly now that we've covered all the ways of getting it into Hunchly. Now, the first and most important button here is export case. What this is going to do is bundle your entire case up, stick it in a zip file, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. All right, do your thing. Cool. Export successful. So I'm on my desktop. This is where I told it to export to. We have this nice zip file. This file can be imported back into your Hunchly. You can send it to a colleague. They can import it into theirs. As well, if, for example, you want to send your case to someone who does not have Hunchly, you can do that. You can send them the zip file. They can unzip it, which I'm doing now very slowly. All right, very nice. Cool. And inside of it is all of your important materials, clearly labeled attachment, pages, photos, and you get this nice little kind of embedded dashboard. So this is all of the contents of your export. Someone can actually go through this just like they would as if it was kind of a Hunchly dashboard. By clicking on here, this is actually loading the capture from your export. Okay, this is not browsing the open internet. This is loading the capture from the export. So this is really nice. Our notes are in here, captioned photos, and our attachments. So someone can actually get a really good view of your case just from a Hunchly case export. And as I mentioned, when we have a case that we want to import back in, we can go up here, click the plus button, import case. We can either create a new case from this import, we can merge it with an existing case. So maybe we're working on a team and we want to create one single master case from everybody's work. We pick the zip file by clicking the green button, hit import, and it's going to bring all of that case data back in, and your dashboard will reflect all of the stuff that you had in that case. So very useful, very simple. Those zip files are both useful on their own. Back them up naturally. I always take backups of mine. Usually at the end of the day, actually, if I'm working on a case, I'll actually export my case, chuck it on my backup server right away. Once you delete something from Hunchly, it is gone for good. So there is no recovering it. So I always recommend people taking backups. All right. So that's our export case, how to get it out, how to get it back in. We can talk about our custom exports here. And really, the big one is exporting pages. How do we just export pages? Maybe in bulk. So by clicking this, I can say I want to export my important pages and my social media, for example. And I can hit OK. I'll tell it to dump it into the desktop. So this is going to export both PDF and MHTML of both any pages that were under social media, and I think I picked important, right? So that's the first way that we can actually export pages. The other way is in our history view, okay? If we wanted to pick this page, for example, I can select it and hit page export. Same deal. I can say drop it in my desktop. That's going to create a PDF and an MHTML file, the original capture, right there in the desktop for me. You can also, from in here, we're on a page capture. We can go right here and hit export page and select MHTML or PDF. So if we just want to selectively shoot off a PDF to somebody of a page, we can do that. Okay, now the PDFs, so let's just take a look at our exported pages here. Okay, important is social media. So let's take a look here. PDFs are notoriously bad at being converted from web pages. So this is one of those cases where, and I'll zoom in a bit here for you, my old eyes here. Cool. So in our PDF exports, we actually have metadata at the top, URL, capture date, and the hash of the page. Okay, the hash is for the MHTML capture, and then it'll get down into the content. So sometimes these page captures, they don't always convert nicely to PDF, whereas the MHTML is going to give you a much more accurate representation of the page just by design. So PDFs actually were never designed to display web content, really. That's not really what they were for. So, but tons of people ask for them. So that's how you can do that. You can export. There's our MHTML page. MHTML files only require a Chrome-based browser to view. That's it. So anybody who's got Microsoft Windows has already got Edge, and Edge, as you can see, will by default open the MHTML file just fine. All right. Okay, so that's page exports. Very simple. Again, custom export, page export to do it by tag, or you can go through your history view, whichever way you want. There's a few different options there. We also have the notion of a selective export. So this is where we can kind of mix and match stuff that we want. So I want to export my important pages, my captioned images, and I want all my notes in a single PDF. All right, so there's a few options here, and maybe my case attachments too, right? So it kind of allows you to bundle up only the things that you want or remove them, hit export, pick the folder, off it goes. Okay? All right. Any questions about full case exports, page exports, anything like that before I jump into the report builder in our last 5 minutes? Okay, doesn't look like it. Great. Now let's build a report. So I'm going to open Report Builder. So this is our report builder. This is not a full authoring environment like Microsoft Word, but it's a great place to build short, simple reports or interim reports, or folks will use this to kind of build out report sections for larger reports. So how do we use this? Well, the first thing we want to do is add a title. So I'm just going to put, there we go. Cool. So that's the title of my report. If I want to add a title page, click up here, add title page. Okay. So it was by me investigating me, and I can put my organization name in like that. I can add a logo if I want. You can also template this stuff in your settings if you don't want to do this every time. Okay, so I can add a logo in if I want. I'm not gonna. I'm gonna leave that. So now I have my title page. Okay. Now everything else is built in sections, just like real reports. So let's just call this like evidence. Now I want to actually add some data. Well, the first thing I can add is maybe some text saying, here are the interesting things I found. There you go. That was add text box. Now I want to add some case data. So by clicking that, gives you this kind of pop-up with some options. So here's where we can actually do things like we can filter based on selectors and tags. So if we want to filter down into our social media pages, we can grab screenshots that were taken. When Hunchly hits a page, it does screenshot right at the beginning before the capture. So for example, if I wanted to add these two things as my social media items to my report, I can do that. Okay, so that's added these two in. If we want to look at some of the other stuff, we can add our notes. So maybe we'll grab this note. I can add in maybe a caption image or two. Okay, I can shuffle these things around if I want, move them around. Sorry, my there are times where in my virtual machine I get like half of a mouse working, and this is a great time for it to be right now. You see that? It's like hold on, give me 1 second. Let me get out of this VM and go back in if I can. 1 second. All right, let's try that. Are you working? No, half working. It's usually the demo gods that do this. I have some clicking working again. There we go. Perfect. So we can shuffle just by clicking and dragging, shuffle things around. We can also do that with sections by grabbing here if you want to shuffle sections around. So again, we can just be building up kind of whatever was important to us, throw them in sections, build it out any way you want. You can add as many sections as you want. So, weird stuff we can have or whatever you need. Build out whatever sections, add case data to it, shuffle the sections around however you want. We can also add the capture history. So this will create a table of all the pages that were captured. I can add that in. Maybe I don't want it at the front of my report. I want it on the bottom. Okay. So we can see all of the results, the stuff that we browse to and when we browse to them. And now I want to actually export this. So I can hit export report. Now here's where my workflow may differ from yours. I have a Word template that I use for all of my reporting. So what I'll do is I'll export it to Word, and then I'll open my Hunchly report on the left, and I have my regular report template on the right, and then I'm just pulling stuff across from my Hunchly report over. If you want to just send an interim report or something quick and easy, you can build it in PDF. You can add in a table of contents if you want. We can export this. So I'm going to save that to my desktop. Okay, so there's our report right here. There's the details that I punched in, table of contents. Weird stuff. Oh yeah, that was blank. Cool. So you can see this is where I shuffle things around. There's the text I entered before. This is a note. Or actually, sorry, that was just a screenshot. We'll get down into our notes as well. So here's this captioned image, right? So you see the image caption, date, hash, image URL, page URL. Again, not often you want all of these fields necessarily when you're building a report. This is why I like using the Word version with my own template, so I can kind of like get rid of the table if I want to, or I can just move the image over. However you need to work, it's really just designed to help kind of build these simple little reports so that you can pass them off or you can add them into a larger report. And that's really it. It's very simple to use. You can template them out, as I mentioned, by using your settings. So if, for example, in your settings, you want to have a standard kind of method for reporting, you can always have the author, org name, and logo here. You can add a classification. So that will be, if you want to have like classified stamped in the header and footer of every page, you would put that in here. And you can also have default report sections. So maybe you want every report that you start in Hunchly to have an executive summary. That was supposed to say summary. And you want evidence. And you want conclusion. Now, any new report or any new case I create will have these sections already preloaded for me in the report builder, and I can just start dropping content into them. All right. Next, we do have questions already. Are these captures in your report considered to be admissible for court? I'm not sure if, I guess based on the question, the captures in the report themselves, like the report itself, is not, reports are not, like that's not necessarily what I would consider court admissible because, for example, if we take a look here, like this is just a representation of the evidence, right? So really, if you were going to supply this report to court, you would want to also supply every page underneath this that it's referencing or image, right? As for the report itself, I'm not sure. I guess depending on jurisdiction, maybe would depend on that. But usually, yeah, it's really if you're going to submit something to court, the court admissible piece is the source material, which are page captures, images, attachments, anything that's hashed. Okay, perfect, excellent, cool. Well, we're 2 minutes over. I'm sorry for that. Are there any follow-up questions or anything that I can help with? I'm sorry, no, I don't share my investigative report template from Word. My apologies. Any other questions I can help to answer? No other? Yeah, no problem. No problem. I get asked that. All right. I'm not seeing any questions. And since we're already a couple minutes over, then I will leave you all to move on with your day. And definitely feel free to head to our YouTube channel. We have other, I'll pop this in the chat. We have other materials there, other webinars, stuff for dark web, malware, all kinds of stuff that we've done in the past. And feel free to send me an email or our team. You can hit justin@hunch.ly, put that into the chat as well. Feel free to reach out if you have follow-up questions or feature requests, anything like that. If I can't help you, then I will get my team to help you for sure. And thanks so much for hanging out today. I really appreciate it, and definitely join us again in the future. If there's anything else that we can do to help, don't be shy to reach out and ask. All right, bye for now.